Hello, everybody. I guess people will start pouring in now. Um, I'm here. I'm live with the wonderful Aaron Maté, who you also know from the Grayzone. He does wonderful journalism, wonderful work. He did great stuff debunking this whole Russiagate hysteria, the whole new McCarthyism from the Democratic Party. And he's also done excellent work on Syria as well. We're going to talk a lot about the OPCW report that came out and how they tried to discredit the scientists that took part in that investigation. So let me bring on the wonderful Aaron Maté. There he is. How you doing, Aaron?
Richard, hey man, thanks for having me.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Once again, as I said before, I'm trying very hard not to fangirl and just concentrate on the topic. Just before we get into the OPCW, the report itself, I want to explain to people where Duma is, because I don't think they actually realize like geographically the importance of it. So I just want to show them the map very quickly. So essentially, in February of 2018, so this is 2 months before the alleged gas attack, the Syrian army, they launched an offensive to take back Jobar, which is a district of Damascus, and then Harasta and Duma. So I'll show you that on the map right now. So as I said, this offensive started in February 2018, right? So it's called Operation Damascus Steel. And the point, as I said, was to take back the district of Jobar, which is right here in Damascus. So, I mean, for people who know Damascus, this is like 1 second from Sahat al-Abbasin, which is the Abbasin Square, which is very important. There's a football stadium there as well. It's a very central, incremental part of Damascus. And, Jobar for a long time was occupied by, these Al-Qaeda offshoots and, these Al-Qaeda linked groups. And they were essentially just lobbing mortars into central Damascus. My cousin, who's at the architecture faculty, at one point you had 15 students just killed. I mean, this is just madness. And so if you look at Jobar now, it looks like Berlin or Hamburg in 1945. It's completely decimated. And the army launched this offensive to take it back. And, next to Jobar, afterwards, you have Harasta over here, and then Duma, okay? And so this entire region, which is outlined, this is Ghouta, right? And Ghouta is like this green farmland, and, it's on the outskirts of Damascus. And so it was under occupation by the terrorists, by these, or as they call them, moderate rebels for like 8 years, essentially, 6 years from 2012 to 2018 when this offensive took place. So, what's interesting is by the 26th of February, they had already, they were, so in red, you have the government controlled areas, and in green, you have the opposition groups. This is Jaysh al-Islam, Ahrar al-Sham, and Tahrir al-Sham, all of these. I mean, there's so many of them, Max Blumenthal and Ben Norton and Aaron Maté, they probably know all of them by heart. I can't even keep up, and I'm serious. It's just ridiculous. So, this is 26th of February, and then this is the 13th of March. And then right here, we have the 1st of April. And essentially, the Syrian government has taken back most of Ghouta at this point, right? So all you have left is Duma. And over here, this is from the 12th of April. So this is essentially a few days after the alleged gas attack. I mean, look, they've taken back most of the thing. And my point here, the point that I'm trying to make, is that the Syrian government has already taken back, they've essentially already won most of this battle. They've taken back most of Ghouta, and you have this tiny spot, and then all of a sudden, there's a chemical gas attack. How convenient. I mean, just like strategically, militarily, this makes no sense to me. I mean, does this make any sense to you, Aaron? Like, who would okay this, honestly?
No, it's, from Assad's point of view, it would mean that as he's about to retake this territory, he does the one thing that he knows will trigger U.S.-led bombings.
Yeah.
And, and there's a history to it. I mean, a year before the alleged Duma attack, there was Khan Shaykhun, And there's a whole bunch of questions about that now as well. And in Ghouta, in eastern Ghouta in 2013, there was an allegation Obama had invoked the red line. Obama was going to bomb. But then later on, we learned that he was given intelligence briefings by James Clapper, who told them that the intelligence here is not a slam dunk at all, that Assad did it. And we've had more evidence come out from people like Sy Hersh, who reported that the militants in that area had acquired sarin. And then there's an MIT professor, Ted Postal, who did a study saying that the rockets were likely fired not from government positions, but from militant-controlled positions. And so Obama did not bomb back then, to say the least. And that actually led to a deal with Syria and Russia, where Syria destroyed all of its chemical weapons, which was a huge achievement in multilateral relations. It was, a rare sign of U.S.-Russia cooperation for a good cause, for destroying chemical weapons in a war-torn country. And the OPCW played a critical role in that. It was a participant in that whole process. And now fast forward to Duma in 2018, and the OPCW goes in to investigate another alleged attack. But this time, when the investigators get back to their headquarters, they come up against a cover-up, basically censorship from above, where their superiors pretty much erased all their findings, distorted them, and put out a conclusion that helped justify the official narrative that Assad was guilty, when their own findings had found the exact opposite.
Yeah, I mean, there are like several steps to this. I mean, essentially, we had the WikiLeaks stuff coming out in December, right? So where you had a lot of people from the fact-finding mission. I think there were like 20 people who expressed concern, and then only one person, only their testimony and evidence was used in the preliminary report. So not the final one.
Well, here's what happened. So the investigators go to Duma in a few weeks after the alleged incident, and after Trump bombed Syria in response. So before even the OPCW can investigate Trump and France and Britain launch a bombing of Syria, second year in a row. Then the Duma investigators get in. They're there for about a week. They collect all the evidence. They come back to their headquarters, and they write a report. And the interim report that they put out in early July 2018 is pretty vague. It doesn't reach a conclusion one way or the other. It's just pretty ambiguous. But then nearly a year later, in March of 2019, we get a final report from the Duma fact-finding mission that's a lot different. And it concludes that there are reasonable grounds to believe that chlorine as a chemical weapon was used. And they don't say it outright because of the way of the rules are, where they're not allowed to make direct attribution. Right. But the obvious inference you can make from their conclusion is that the Assad government is guilty, because they basically lent credence to this narrative that these gas cylinders found at the alleged crime scenes were dropped from the sky. And the only party that can drop cylinders from the sky is Syria or Russia. So they basically reinforce the narrative. But then something really interesting happens. In May of 2018, so 2 months after the final report comes out, there's a leak, and it's a detailed engineering study from inside the OPCW. And it concludes that the cylinders were not dropped from the sky, but that they were in fact likely manually placed. And the obvious inference of that is that the whole thing is staged, because, the only reason to it's not as if any Syrian soldiers, parachuted in and then manually placed. That's not how chemical weapons work. So that's the inference, which is radically different from the public conclusion that we got. And that then sets off a whole series of additional leaks where we found out what happened, which is that the author of that engineering report, Ian Henderson, he was the person who not only was his report suppressed, but that report is written by someone, Ian Henderson, who was the person who personally took the measurements of the cylinders at the scene. Exactly. Yeah. He got down on his hands and knees and he measured the cylinders, and he did the studies. And then not only was his report excluded, but so was toxicology reports, samples that showed that the level of chlorine detected was pretty much the level you could find in any household environment. And the actual chlorine itself was chlorine you could find in normal household products. And we found out that was excluded. We also found out that the original author of the first interim report, the one that came out in July 2018, was a different inspector whose name is not known, unlike Ian Henderson.
Yeah,
he's only known as Inspector B.
That's it, right.
And he wrote the initial report. And what we learned from all these leaks is that after he submitted his initial report, his superiors rewrote it, took out all of the findings that would undermine the Syrian government's guilt. And that set off this internal struggle where Inspector B and the other Duma investigators protested. And that led to this compromise interim report that we got publicly. That's why it was so bland, because basically, you know, the investigators refused to sign off on fraud, but they could accept, you know, basically saying nothing in the hopes that they'd have the chance to include their findings in the final report. But they did not. What happened was the OPCW, what that interim report was basically an effort to wait out Inspector B because his tenure was almost up. So he was out. And all that was left then was Ian Henderson. And what they did with him is they just refused to accept his report and include that in their final report. So, you know, that's just some of the chicanery that went on behind the scenes. There also was a very important incident where a day before the interim report, you're having this internal struggle between the actual Duma inspectors and their bosses. Mm-hmm. And so the inspectors are called into a briefing. And so they show up and it's 3 unnamed U.S. officials from, they don't say what department or where they're from, and they don't give their names. And these officials tell them that Assad is guilty, chlorine was the weapon, and the message was this was the conclusion that you had to draw.
I mean, these are essentially G-men, right?
Yeah,
that's what it is. This is absolutely mind-boggling. It really is. It's like a goddamn spider web. I mean, I've covered this. I'm covering this now with you. You've covered it in extensively, and like you really have to dig into this to really understand it. It's quite astounding. And you know, I just want to show people this great article that you wrote for the Grayzone. Where you also got evidence of how they tried to, you know, character assassinate Ian Henderson, who was the team leader of this inspection, and essentially discredit him because they didn't like that he had blown the whistle on this corruption, this malfeasance, whatever you'd like to call it, however nice you want to be about it. So, yeah, just to put that over here. People can see the article. This is written by Aaron for the Grayzone, and you know, here you can see, for example, this piece of evidence. Okay, so I don't know how you got this, but good job. And essentially, you know, they're saying that ODG, which is the directorate, are saying they're happy if the visits to the cylinders and hospital are led by Ian Henderson. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're saying that this guy is an expert. He knows what he's doing, and we want him to lead the team. Not just he's a part of the team. No, he's the goddamn leader, right?
Well, yeah. So this is what happens when you can't refute someone on the facts. And, you know, it's if you've engaged in the Syria issue publicly, surely you've been called an Assadist and all this sort of stuff like that. You know, when I would see my colleague Max Blumenthal and Ben Norton do their reporting on Syria, you know, on Syria for me, I've never been there. I'm not an expert on it. I don't know much about it. But the one thing I noticed when they would do their reporting is people would call them awful names, say, you know, they would cancel them, say all kinds of things about them, but they'd never challenge them on the facts.
Exactly.
And that's what you do. That's just that's the only way, that's the only recourse people who are on the wrong side of history that's the only recourse that they have, because they can't contest the facts. And so that's what's playing out here, where you have, you know, these veteran OPCW experts, non-political people, dedicated servants, brave people. It's not an easy mission to go to Syria during a proxy war and go to the site of an alleged chemical attack. And in fact, their convoy or their delegation was delayed because there was so much danger for them to go in.
Yeah.
These are noble people, and these are experts. These are actual experts in chemistry and engineering. That's why they're at the OPCW, and that's why they're not at outfits like Bellingcat, which get funded by Western governments to propagandize people. And so, you know, and so what they did in the case of Ian Henderson, it's quite amazing. And I guess they didn't think that there'd be leaks to undermine it. But they said two things, or they said many things, but two main things. One, they said that Ian Henderson played a minor supporting role in the Duma investigation. And they also said that he was not even a member of the fact-finding mission. And so that's an obvious attempt to basically paint him as a marginal figure with access to limited information. But the documents that we got leaked at the Grayzone show that Ian Henderson was a member of the fact-finding mission. It's listed in the actual OPCW documents that we got. And B, far from playing a minor supporting role, there's documentation showing that the Office of the Director General wanted him to lead the inspections at the mission's most critical sites, the crime scene, looking at the cylinders, and at the hospital where the alleged victims were taken. So it's just that's just one piece of where if they're lying about Ian Henderson, then what else are they lying about? And it's obvious they're lying about him to try to cover up their cover up.
That's the thing, man. And as you mentioned, this is quite astounding. Like, they do character assassination, they do smears, they're trying to discredit his person. Like, listen, stop trying to change the goddamn subject. The dude said the chemistry, the science is bad. Like, what you're writing is bad. Why aren't you answering? Why aren't you responding to the goddamn science? I don't care if Mickey Mouse wrote the report or if Winnie the Pooh or Ian Henderson wrote it. I want to know why you're avoiding this. Okay. But no, they can't respond to his claims that, this is very questionable evidence. The gas cylinder was placed manually. There are trace amounts of chlorine. This could have come from someone's kitchen sink. No, they're not responding to that. They're just trying to character assassinate him. I mean, to me, this is 1984 level of dishonesty. It's like the guy was the team leader and they're saying that, no, he was never there. What? Like, they think we're stupid or something. I mean, it's astounding. It really is. I can't believe it.
Yeah, and speaking of 1984, I mean, look at the media reaction. Western media, when Trump launched these strikes, fawned over him, and you have clips of Brian Williams, talking about the beauty of our weapons, and when Trump does stuff like this, he gets widespread applause. Then you have this amazing story come out of these whistleblowers, and we're supposed to love whistleblowers. I mean, that's like whistleblowers are very in style because of the impeachment with Trump. It was all about protecting the whistleblower, how we have to stand up for whistleblowers.
Right.
These two whistleblowers, who have been very careful, who have been with the OPCW since its founding, and who are, have impeccable records, as we show in one case in that article. We talk about all the praise that Ian Henderson was shown at there because he was such a high-level expert. And the Western media completely ignores it. I mean, there's some reference to it in passing in a couple articles. Like the New York Times made a vague reference to it at the bottom of an article about something else. Actually, about Bellingcat. In a glowing profile of Bellingcat, the New York Times added this at the bottom about, there was some controversy recently, and they dismiss it. That's the only mention of it in the New York Times. And in The Guardian, they talk about the doubts about Duma being part of a Russian-led disinformation campaign. No. This is a whistleblower. This is a whistleblower case. This is the OPCW's actual experts saying that their evidence was censored.
Exactly.
And the level of self-censorship on the part of the Western media is right out of 1984. And making it even more amazing is that it extends even to progressive and adversarial outlets, even outlets that have pushed the pro-Trump narrative. Because that's what it is, by the way. They're doing really Trump's bidding here. It was the Trump administration that launched these strikes against Syria based on this allegation, and the Trump administration that pressured the OPCW directly, as we know now, with that briefing, so-called briefing. And so this should be a Trump scandal, but everybody is silent about it because bipartisan support for war and destabilizing foreign governments is just it's overwhelming, and it extends even into the left, unfortunately, in the U.S. and Britain as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's a really interesting and great point that you made. They love whistleblowers when it comes to Trump. All of a sudden, like, Trump is a Russian agent, and Russia helped him hack the elections and win the elections and all this stuff. But when it comes to actual scientists telling you that the science is bad and you shouldn't be bombing other countries because of it, then all of a sudden we don't know who these people are. We're not going to talk about them. We're going to be silent, and then discredit them too. Again, just to go back to this great article that you wrote, there's another piece of evidence here from so this is the mission personnel that went on the trip to Duma, the fact-finding mission. These are the scientists that went to Syria, to Duma, to analyze this evidence. And you can see here, Ian Henderson, he's listed as FFM, meaning fact-finding mission, meaning he was part of this team. And I mean, no less the leader, actually. So he wasn't just, as they're saying, oh, he was some fringe, he was like a fringe character on this team. And that's not true. He was in the fact-finding mission, and he was leading the team. And nonetheless, they're trying to like skew reality. It's really mind-boggling. It's absolutely insane.
It's not. I mean, look. I mean, notice their response to this article. It's nothing. If those documents were fake, if the claims were false, they would say so. They'd say this is not true, but they can't, because those are their own documents, and they've been asked for comment about this, but nothing.
It's insane.
It is, but And what allows it to continue is just widespread media obedience, a refusal, unfortunately pervasive across the board, to touch this story. I've never actually seen anything like it.
Yeah, it's really disgusting. And honestly, like if we can make a critique of the progressive wing of progressive media, even among progressive media, you don't see everybody cover this. They're scared to touch Syria, right? Because as you mentioned, as soon as you take the anti-war side, it's like, oh, Assad apologized. Motherfucker, I don't give a shit about Assad. I just want to go to Syria and eat roasted chicken. I'm sick of this war, man. It's that simple. Yeah. And not to mention, like, dude, let's be true to the science here. For God's sake, can we be true to facts like they claim? Can we be true to science? Can we respect whistleblowers? Like, make your mind up. What do you want to do? You can't play both sides when you're against Trump and then also support Trump when he goes to war. This is ridiculous. By the way, another piece of evidence that Aaron got a hold of for his article. Let me show you over here. It says Ian Henderson will be part of the team conducting technical secretariat visits in the context of the information provided by the Syrian Arab Republic in its correspondence to the OPCW. So this was the Syrian government, giving him permission to come there. And you can note next to his name, it says UNLP. So I don't know if everybody knows what that means, but that's a United Nations laissez-passer. So that's a blue passport. My parents used to have them because they were United Nations peacekeepers. They don't give them to just anybody. This is when you can go to any country with this. You just show up and they let you in, as long as they're United Nations members, of course, which is essentially most countries on this planet. And they don't give that to just anybody. Okay, so this assertion that Ian Henderson was just some kind of fringe character hanging around is absolutely ridiculous. They specifically requested him. He was on a mission elsewhere, if I recall correctly. Could you
exactly?
Yeah.
So what's funny about that is the reason that document is so significant is because when they've talked about Ian Henderson publicly, they tried to pretend that he wasn't a part of the mission by saying that he was not listed on the initial mandate for the mission personnel, and that's true. Because what happened was, at the time that the fact-finding mission was formed, Ian Henderson was on a different mission in Nepal.
There we go.
And he got back to headquarters, and immediately they were like, listen, we need someone with your level of expertise, because he was the only member of that team with that high a level of expertise in chemical engineering and ballistics. So they added him to the team precisely because they needed his expertise. And the way the OPCW leadership has tried to pretend that he wasn't a part of the team was by forgetting all of that and just going by the fact that he wasn't listed on the initial list before they realized that they needed him. And so that letter there that you just showed is them notifying the Syrian government that he will be a part of the team, precisely because they needed his expertise, which they've totally excluded.
Yeah, this is insane. I can't believe the level of Orwellian. It's really Orwellian, this cover up that they're doing. And do we know anything else about Inspector B? I'm quite curious about who this person might be, or
What I can tell you is that Inspector B is a veteran OPCW official who wrote the interim report, and you don't just give that assignment to a low-level person. Inspector B basically coordinated all the scientific activity inside Duma. Right. And was the only team member who could get all the information. After they got back from Duma, Inspector B was the only team member with access to all the information, which is done on purpose to basically, have like a proper chain of custody and to limit discussions amongst inspectors beyond their purview. So right. Inspector B was the one entrusted to have all the information and put it together into the interim report, which he wrote until it was completely censored. And we have, it was leaked, the initial version that he wrote with the version that came out publicly. And you compare the two and there's just so much missing. And it's inexplicable. Why take out the fact that there's a level of chlorine found there in the parts per billion? And why take out the fact that that toxicology experts found that the symptoms displayed by the alleged victims in videos were totally inconsistent with chlorine? They took out so many things. So Inspector B's identity has not been publicly confirmed. There have been attempts to dox him by Bellingcat and other pro-proxy war outlets. But I can just tell you that he is a veteran OPCW official who's basically been there for as long as Ian Henderson has, which is since the OPCW was founded. And both of them, interestingly, have served 2 terms. This is not their first go-around. They came back, and this was for their second term, precisely because there was a dearth of expertise at the OPCW. That's why they came back. And they came back because they, I think, believe in the mission. And the idea of the OPCW is very noble, to try to stop the spread and to end the use of chemical weapons. It's very noble. Yes. And the organization has done noble work. And if you read what has come out from them, in terms of the internal leaks, you see people who, as you were saying, are just fighting for their science to be heard. They're not even wedded to any conclusion. They just want the science included and acknowledged and not censored.
Yeah, I don't think, just listening to Ian Henderson, and the way he speaks, and especially what he wrote, the things that were left out, that were omitted from the report, I don't think that, there's no politics involved. This is literally just science, and they're removing evidence, that would, clearly indicate that this stuff was a hoax. It was placed manually. The cylinders were placed manually, and I just think this whole notion that a conventional army, a state would do such a shitty job of a chemical attack is, it's just. If a government had done that, if a conventional army had done that, you would verify that immediately. It would be easy to figure out. Nonetheless, as we saw, they were just trace amounts of chlorine. Anyone could have done that, and it makes no sense strategically, as I showed with the maps. In the battle for Eastern Ghouta, they'd already taken back Jobar, they had taken back Harasta, they had just surrounded Douma. And then conveniently, there's a chemical attack. Strategically, militarily, this makes absolutely no sense for any party, any army to conduct a chemical attack and then cross this red line, as you mentioned Obama had come up with. It makes no sense. And then on top of it, we have the whole cover-up by the OPCW. Jesus Christ, for me, I didn't need all of this to know that it's garbage. Anyone who believes anything that Western governments say about WMDs after 2003 is a fucking moron. Colin Powell went to the United Nations and lied for something much greater than this. So why would they tell the truth? Why would they attempt to, pursue the truth in this case then? This is a fart compared to Iraq. You think they wouldn't lie about this? They've lied about anything. How can you believe what they say? This is insane to me. Does no one remember Iraq? What's going on here?
Well, and what's interesting is there's a continuity a direct continuity really between Iraq and Syria, because during Iraq, John Bolton, when he was working for Bush, he directly threatened the head of the OPCW at the time, Jose Bustani, because Bustani was trying to broker some inspections that could basically slow the Bush administration's march to war. And so Bustani was in the way of Bush's war. And we later found out, Bustani has spoken about it a little bit, although not too much because I think he's still a little bit scared. But Bolton said to him, we know where your kids live and we can harm them. Jesus. Bolton, it's not just career consequences, which is, the norm, but he even, threatened Bustani with personal harm. And so you have a long record of the U.S. Threatening diplomats at the OPCW. And, that continues now imagine what these whistleblowers, what it must be like for them now. So they risk their lives to go to Syria. They do the best job they can. All they're doing is fighting for their evidence to be heard. Their story comes out. people are doxing them. Their organization is now discrediting them, throwing them under the bus, saying all these false things about them. And the Western media, which is supposed to be championing whistleblowers, especially people who, like they're challenging Trump here, they're challenging war.
Yeah.
These are all noble things. Is total silence. And what the sad thing about the silence is it's not just cowardly on the part of all the outlets that are ignoring this. It's also dangerous when media can often be the only cover and safety that whistleblowers have, because when it shines a light on their story, it helps protect them from retaliation. But right now there's just silence, and that makes it easier to proceed with this cover up and to destroy these whistleblowers' reputations. And so it's just, it's really infuriating, and it just speaks to how much the Syria proxy war was just a critical piece of Western government power and its designs for the world, and a Western media that should be acting as a check on these governments is instead acting totally as its stooge because they went along with that narrative as well. And it's just, the power of like the whole propaganda campaign around Syria has been really, really effective. It's left the skepticism and the actual journalism to, a very small few. There's still a couple of people at mainstream outlets who do accurate work, like Patrick Coburn of The Independent or Robert F. Worth of The New York Times. But aside from that, it's all just people in Beirut or Turkey, being fed claims by their Western intelligence contacts and their quote unquote rebel contacts, and going with it. And unfortunately, there's been just such little scrutiny, even among progressive media in the U.S. It's really, the full history we don't even know about yet, but when it all does come out, it will be even more damning than what we already know about. Yeah,
exactly. Totally. And it's like you said, you got these Western journalists who are like stuck in Turkey or Beirut being fed a bunch of BS by, a Western intelligence, essentially, via rebel contacts. And they just publish it and they don't even care to verify if the information is correct. I mean, okay, understandably, this is stuff happening in a war zone. It's difficult to verify as well. It's difficult, but still, nonetheless, they don't even bother to, check if these claims are true. And it's really weird when you compare mainstream media now. I mean, mainstream media has always been horrible, but back then, at least when you had like the Pentagon Papers or let's say Watergate, like how do you rationalize that mainstream media from then and what we're seeing now? What happened to these institutions?
Well, media's gotten more and more concentrated into, a even smaller sector of power. And, it's just gotten way more corporate and progressive, in terms of even like, you look at progressive outlets that maybe would have covered this before, but don't cover it now. It's people got duped. People got duped by propaganda. This whole, push to the right and this whole Cold War, Russia is responsible for all the evils of the world thing that's happened, especially since 2016, has really been effective in enlisting progressives. I mean, it basically because it was partly because it was packaged as the way to resist Trump, but also just because there are people who are, who have been duped very effectively by Western state propaganda, and some people, I don't know, I like who are probably acting like literally in concert with Western intelligence. I'm sure there are some people posing as lefties who are, who are doing that. I don't know. I have no one particular in mind. I really don't, but I'm sure they're out there. I mean, if you're an intelligence agency, that's what you do. Yeah. And that's what Western intelligence agencies have done for a long time. So,
exactly. But this is their whole counterintelligence program, infiltrate and poses other people, sow dissent. Oh yeah. They're good at this. They've been training for 50, 60 years.
That's right.
Yeah, it's insane. And, I'd like to ask you also, what do you think, what are your thoughts on, the other chemical attacks that happened in Syria, like Khan Shaykhun, for example, or Latakia, which also I think OPCW published a report recently about Latakia. What do you think about that? And also, like, can we believe anything they say? Because the credibility of the OPCW is now being put under into question, and it's reasonably so, justifiably so, under scrutiny. Who can believe them now?
Yeah, well, on Latakia, it's the same thing, where you have dubious claims. The logic of it makes no sense, that the Syrian government would use chemical weapons against a couple of empty fields, and whereas they've never used it before when they were under serious threat, like in Idlib or Latakia, where if the rebels had won there, they would have committed sectarian mass murder. There was no chemical weapons used there, but then all of a sudden they're going to use them on 3 empty fields in Latakia. It doesn't make any sense. And in fact, we published something at the Grayzone written by some OPCW insiders, a small group, and it represents the view of some current and former officials who are basically saying that this is another case where the investigation was politicized. It makes no sense. They show the holes in it. I mean, and the same thing with Khan Shaykhun. There have been, Sy Hersh has done some reports pushing back on this, and again, it just there like looking at the plane route, like the plane that would have allegedly dropped this chemical weapon on Khan Shaykhun, where it was like there was no way it was in a flight path that could possibly have landed a bomb on the crater that was found. And again, it's another thing where it made perfect sense, where Assad was closing in, or the Syrian government was closing in, and the one thing happened that could have triggered, or Assad allegedly did the one thing that could have triggered U.S. bombing.
Exactly.
And that's what,
This is what's so insane about it. It's like always conveniently placed, and of course.
But it's that same, people just, in the service of Western propaganda and Western state designs, people just abandon critical thinking because the propaganda is so overwhelming and it's so effective. It works on people. So in the same way that people abandon, elementary logic and skepticism here, they also believe that Syrian rebels are a bunch of like freedom lovers just trying to, fight for democracy, as I'm sure people believed in Afghanistan in the 80s too. And what is kept from us is the reality that, in fact, the insurgency is dominated by jihadists, mainly Al-Qaeda and ISIS, funded by Saudi Arabia and Turkey and the U.S. All that just gets lost.
Yeah. People just they don't understand history. They don't understand the Cold War. They don't understand the involvement of the United Kingdom, the United States, France, Turkey, Israel, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. They just don't understand any of this. And that's not to say that the Syrian government, they're exactly saints. No, but like you have to understand the power dynamics at play here. It's not like some kind of noble revolutionary cause that just sprouted out of nowhere. And there's a lot of foreign involvement in here. There are a lot of people have dogs in this race, a lot of money involved, a lot of foreign interests, and people don't understand that. And so, like you said, it's very easy to get duped by the Western media, even progressives, so-called progressives. I mean, I've heard some cringe-worthy shit from other progressive pundits about Syria. Oh my God! I mean, it's really crazy. Like they only know how to think in black and white, and it's like again, they're just following the narrative that is given to them by mainstream media outlets like New York Times and Washington Post. Like, you're supposed to be diametrically opposed to the establishment. If you're claiming that you're independent media and you know better, why are you just like going along with their talking points? It's insane to me. And you mentioned a few times this Bellingcat. Do you mind telling people who Bellingcat are and what the NED is and how this works?
Well, I'd love to know exactly who Bellingcat is, because I don't think who they present themselves to be is entirely above board. But what they are is this: all of a sudden, I'm not sure exactly when they popped up, but they popped up a few years ago, and there's supposedly this collective of researchers using open source intelligence, like satellite imagery, to be able to identify details on military conflict and to identify perpetrators of attacks. And it just so happens that the bulk of their output goes towards demonizing enemies of Western governments and blaming them for the crimes that they're accused of. So they've done a lot of work, quote unquote, in Syria, claiming that they found evidence that Syria is responsible for all the chemical attacks that they're accused of. They anytime Russia is accused of something, Russia, according to Bellingcat, is always guilty. But then you look into their funding and who's behind them, and you see that they're funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, which was created by President Ronald Reagan, and has been used pretty openly to accomplish what the CIA tries to do around the world, which is to destabilize governments that the U.S. doesn't like.
Right.
And the NED doesn't give money just to any democracy lover. It gives money only to people who are trying to undermine democracies and governments that the U.S. doesn't like. And so the fact that Bellingcat gets money from them is suspicious. They also get money from other Western government sources, and they look. There's a whole, and they don't actually have any scientific credentials. They're not credentialed scientists. There's this profile of Bellingcat co-founder Elliot Higgins in the New York Times. And there's this line, I couldn't believe it, but it says, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, Mr. Higgins doesn't attribute his knowledge to any special training, but to the hours he had spent playing video games. And that's literally who these people are. Yes, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. That's an actual line. I'll try to find it, but it's like,
oh my God.
But it's like, so it's like, but then you look at Western media, like you look at Bellingcat, the New York Times. Sorry, you look at the Guardian and the New York Times, and all of a sudden Bellingcat is treated as this authoritative source who we should trust more than the OPCW's own inspector. And so it's shady, and they were even caught in this like weird lie where it's so funny. So in the fall of just like a little background. So
sure.
In going back to Ian Henderson's suppressed report, the first leak we got showing that there was something wrong happening inside the OPCW, that there was a cover-up. Ian Henderson makes reference to his boss's reliance on what he calls supposed experts, which is a curious line. This OPCW inspector is saying that the OPCW is relying on, quote, supposed experts. So who is he talking about? Because what he's basically saying there is that the OPCW leadership is not listening to him and his studies and his colleagues' studies, but they're relying on somebody else, and he calls them supposed experts. And for a professional to go out and call someone a supposed expert, that's like that's like you're saying that someone basically is a fraud. Yeah. Because you're saying you don't trust the credentials and the expertise of someone who your bosses are relying on. And there's been a lot of speculation that those supposed experts are Bellingcat. That basically, once they realized that their own inspectors were coming up with conclusions that undermined the narrative that Assad was guilty, the OPCW leadership then went and relied on these outside experts, including possibly Bellingcat, to come up with these junk science studies that could justify the conclusion that Assad was guilty. So there's been speculation that Bellingcat was who Ian Henderson was talking about when he referred to supposed experts. And then we fast forward to the fall of 2019. And Bellingcat puts out this policy document. It's this long thing talking about their goals, what they do, who funds them, and it includes the NED. And there's a whole list that they show of all their partners, groups they work with. And there's like the White Helmets, there's Open Society, all these different groups. And one of those groups is the OPCW.
Yep. So
that's interesting.
I
what
saw
is
on Twitter,
Bellingcat partnering with the OPCW on? And so that's the fall of 2019. And then the Duma scandal keeps unfolding. We get more and more leaks. A second whistleblower emerges, Inspector B. And fast forward to January, February of this year. And Elliot Higgins, the video game expert, co-founder of Bellingcat, announces on Twitter, he says, "Hey, everyone, I made a mistake. When I said that Bellingcat partners with OPCW, that was a mistake. What happened was I copied and pasted a list from another document in error. So we've now updated our policy document to correct the error."
Yeah.
So you go to that policy document, and it's the same language. Bellingcat partners with the following organizations. And it's all the same organizations except for one, the OPCW. So now all of a sudden, The only organization that Bellingcat supposedly never partnered with in this long list happens to be the one that is now mired in scandal and was relying on fake
You
experts.
caught
It's just
them.
very
I saw that on Twitter. I saw it like a few weeks ago. Man, that was amazing.
I did. Well, you know, I wasn't the only one to catch them. Other people did as well. But I certainly took a lot of glee in pointing that out and in asking Elliot Higgins how it is that when you made this copy and paste error, that you only erroneously copy falsely, like there's only one erroneous name on that entire list, and it happens to be the OPCW.
What a coincidence!
You know?
What a coincidence!
It's obvious what happened is that it's obvious that as this scandal was unfolding, the OPCW asked him to basically no longer claim that they were working together, because it seems to me, I can't prove it yet, but I would bet that OPCW, that Bellingcat has been used for this fraud.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, like this is just pathetic, and you know, it's so sloppy, and it's really calling into question the credibility of the OPCW now. And I mean, supposed experts, when Ian Henderson is writing that, it's definitely like, yeah, these are some shady actors, and I don't trust their science. And you know, as we saw in the WikiLeaks from December, I think it was November, December 2019, they said that a lot of the people who actually went to Duma, who were part of the fact-finding mission, their science wasn't actually used. You know, their findings weren't actually used in the preliminary report, and it's just like they assembled a new team. I think they called them the core FFM team, right? They assembled a whole new team of people who didn't even go to Duma.
Exactly. The core, if you're a member of the core team, the one that produced the final report, by definition, you did not go to Duma. And where you might have gone is Turkey.
Okay.
Because some members went to Turkey, and in Turkey they met with members of the White Helmets and other members of the opposition who gave them evidence. And that's another problem with all these so-called investigations by the OPCW. They all include receiving evidence in Turkey, which has been given to them by the militants who are fighting Assad. Yeah. You know, and they claim that there's like a proper chain of custody after they get the evidence. But what about before they get the evidence? And you know, and so look, it's such an obvious fraud. Speaking of frauds, I'll just read you that quote I was talking about.
Yes.
About Bellingcat co-founder Elliot Higgins from the New York Times. Mr. Higgins attributed his skill not to any special knowledge of international conflicts or digital data, but to the hours he had spent playing video games, which he said gave him the idea that any mystery can be cracked. Okay. So he doesn't have any knowledge by his own admission in international conflicts or digital data, but yet he is widely cited in Western media as having expertise in international conflicts and digital data.
Wow.
Along with the fact that they never mentioned that he's literally funded by the U.S. government. I mean, it's like, you know, Russian propagandists should be jealous of how well our propaganda system works.
Yeah, exactly.
It's right out here in the open.
Exactly. Jesus Christ. I mean, like, just to mention the NED that was created under Reagan, this Cold War institution that funds, you know, regime change proponents, and I mean, Jesus Christ, come on. I think I saw Ben Norton, your colleague at the Grayzone. He also posted something today about them funding rappers in Cuba or something like that. Yep. Yeah. I mean, they're active all over the place.
Rock groups in Venezuela. I think Ben tweeted about this today, or someone did, about how NED money has gone to fund rock groups in Venezuela to write protest songs. I mean, they're everywhere. This is what the U.S. does. They put so much money and effort into meddling and destroying disobedient governments, and we're supposed to all just look the other way and take seriously outfits that are funded by them and treat them as serious experts, as if they have some credibility. It's like, it's literally state-funded propaganda.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and the NED is done. I mean, you know, you look at Haiti and everywhere. I mean, you know, all these, you know, global South countries that are trying to chart an independent course, pay their workers maybe a decent wage. That's when the NED comes in to flood the country with propaganda and, you know, gin up protests and all this stuff to try to undermine Democrats, global South countries trying to chart an independent course. And they're everywhere, you know, and they're even they fund all kinds of shady people, and Ben Norton is a great resource to expose them because he's on top of it. He's all over it.
Yeah, I wish people understood this because they think that all of these. You remember Bush coined this term, "the axis of evil." Like, what was it? Syria, North Korea, Iran. Who else is in it? I don't know. So all the countries the U.S. doesn't like.
Iran, Iraq, and North Korea.
Oh, yeah. Syria is not part of it. We're not evil.
Well, Syria was on the list of states that the U.S. There's that famous list of 7 states that Wesley Clark talked about, where he went to the Pentagon after 9/11. And some official told him, yeah, we're going after Iraq, but that's not it. There's also 7 more countries, and Syria was definitely on that list. It's basically any independent government that is an obstacle to U.S. hegemony. I mean, they're just they have to be taken out. That's why we saw. I mean, it happens everywhere. Libya, Syria. They're trying to do it to Iran, and that will keep happening. It will especially keep happening so long as Western leftists become complicit in it, in refusing to stand up to it, and in parroting the narratives that are used for those very same regime change campaigns.
Exactly. And like I said, it's just, man, it's absolutely pathetic seeing progressives on indie media towing this neoliberal line when it comes to foreign policy, which is essentially the same crap that the Republicans are spewing. I mean, there's a hegemony and American imperialism at the heart of this. And I mean, they just sound like fucking neocons, like war hawks. I mean, it's pathetic. Yeah. I mean, it's really astounding. And I'm listening to people like David Pakman repeat shit that you would hear on CNN about Syria, and I'm just looking at him like, you're independent media, you call yourself a progressive, you fucking joke. Like, what is this nonsense? You can't just be a progressive when it comes to domestic stuff in the U.S. because the foreign policy is also directly related to that. Why do you think you don't have Medicare for all? Because you're paying for shit like Belen and rock songs in Venezuela. I mean, that's why you don't have Medicare for all. Can't you connect the dots?
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's especially awful too when you see when Western leftists demonize countries that are being targeted precisely because they're trying to enact the very kind of policies that we all want here at home.
Yeah.
Socialized healthcare for everybody, free education, food programs. I mean, these are things that countries like Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua have all been, struggling for. And that's why in Nicaragua in the 80s, they were targeted with a terror war. And that's why Venezuela right now is being targeted with this suffocating blockade and a destabilization campaign. And yet, we have to, even when we say we're against, coups and interference, it's become required now to be like entered into respectable discourse to like condemn the government, call it evil, brutal, all these things. And I've actually been guilty of that too. It's very, it can be very alluring. You want you think you want to be accepted, you want your message to be heard, so you feel pressure to go along with it. But it's totally cynical and disingenuous because these people, whatever repression is going on in Venezuela right now, I mean, like the vast majority of it would not be happening if not for the fact that Venezuela is resisting the world's most powerful country trying to destroy it.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you're faced with terror campaigns, destabilization campaigns. Of course you crack down. That's what happens every single time.
Exactly.
No government would do anything differently. So it's but yeah, it's weird. But it's for some people it's deemed, I mean, it's not just naivete, it's also they want to be accepted into respectable opinion, and they don't have the courage to stand up to it, so they go along with it, and that's a very common thing.
Yeah, you're totally right, and it's like you said, when these countries stand up to American hegemony, to imperialism, I mean, of course they're going to be crippled by these sanctions. They're going to be crippled economically and also politically, like you said. They end up cracking down internally. Because you have fucking spies from Western nations trying to infiltrate all the time, trying to destroy their economy, trying to destroy their society, trying to destroy, cause just chaos. Just cripple them until they bring them to their knees, and then they can install a puppet government in their place. And I mean, man, this is just really, it's a dynamic that not many people understand. It's very nuanced, and I mean, I just expected better from some so-called progressives. And on that note, what you were doing at the Grayzone, Ben Norton, Max Blumenthal, Anya, all of you guys, you're doing fantastic work. I absolutely love what you. I've been watching you guys for years. Okay, I'm trying not to fangirl too hard here, but I've been watching you guys for years. And when you go on with Jimmy Dore as well, it was really nice to see someone at least standing up for the fucking truth and not towing this neoliberal imperialist bullshit that you see on CNN and MSNBC, because it's really exhausting. It's really, really exhausting. And thank you so much for standing up for the truth. And what you did here with the OPCW, absolutely fantastic. And I'm really grateful that you came on the show to talk about that. So seriously, just thank you so much for being a real journalist.
Well, thanks, Richard. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you, and thank you for doing what you're doing. It's there's something new now. There's less complacency now, and I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. I'm not interested in sugarcoating things. No, thank you. So there you go. And again, say hi to everybody at the Grayzone for me, and keep doing what you're doing. Love your work, everybody. Please give it up for Aaron Maté, the legend. Thank you so much for coming on the show, brother. All right.
Thanks, Richard.
All right.
Take care.
You be good. Take care. I'll see you around. Bye-bye. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. I hope I can put myself back on full screen now. There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. How's it going? That was amazing. I can't believe I just had Aaron Maté on my show. Like, I can't believe I'm saying that sentence. What a legend, right? I just going through everything with him on Syria was picking each other's brains and going through this. That was really wonderful. It's so nice talking to someone who is a respected journalist, who knows what they're doing, who is not just going along and obeying whatever the fucking CIA is putting out in their recent memos. So just 1 second, I'm gonna refresh this window so I can see your chats, because it lags a bit. That was amazing, man. I seriously, wow. Aaron Maté, the legend. It's really cool that he not just did stuff on Syria, but Russiagate as well. He debunked that bullshit and destroyed it. So let me read your super chats, baby. Sam, thank you very much for your super chat. It says it was controlled by the Army of Islam, Jaish al-Islam, who put women in cages and as human shields, or as the media call them, rebels. It's sickening. It is, man. These people just cutting people's fucking heads off in the street. It's disgusting. It's terrorism. And who's paying for this? You already know, Uncle Sam. Dino, thank you very much for your super chat. It says thank goodness for alternative media. Thank you, Poppy, for covering these important issues. Peace. Thank you, and I really appreciate the compliments. And of course, thank you to Aaron Maté. Again, Sam, thank you for your super chat. Says Higgins debated the MIT professor on the gas attack of 2017. It was hilarious watching Higgins get put in his place. Yes, I saw that debate, and it's absolutely it's so ridiculous. It's like, I mean, literally a goddamn expert in ballistics and weapons and forensics schooling him. It's beautiful. Please, everybody, go watch that, and you will see how pathetic this whole Belen institution is. They're literally funded by the fucking CIA. What do you want me to say? We just went through this with Aaron, right? Call us. Done with them in the trash. Men in Black says, love you guys. Slam li habibi. I love you, and it's good seeing fellow Syrians here. Lost in the Fog of War, thank you very much for the super chat. Says, I'm late as usual. I missed the whole interview. Don't worry, it'll be up in a second. Don't worry, brother. And Anthony, thank you for your little banana. I appreciate the consistency. And this was really good. So hold on a second. I think we might have gotten stuff on the other thing. No. Okay, I'm just making sure. Sometimes people send super chats on PayPal because they don't take as big of a cut as YouTube. I'm just making sure I didn't miss nobody. Okay. So guys, really thank you for these lovely comments. You guys are very sweet. And, you know, that was just, that was really great with Aaron. I'm just so thankful to have him on, and really talking with a true journalist. Wonderful. You know, I don't know what else to say. I mean, we said pretty much everything. We just debunked all the Western imperialist bullshit. I mean, look, man, you can't try this crap with me. What these neoliberals are doing. I'm half British and I'm half Syrian. I understand both mentalities. I know how white people think, and I know the truth about what's happening in Syria. I know the truth about the consequences of U.S. hegemony. UK, oh yes, the UK handed off the torch to them in 1945, did they not? And I know the consequences of colonialism, how they divided up the Middle East. You can't play these games with me, okay? So, you know, just really lovely talking with the genius Aaron Maté. And please go read his article, the one that we just showed on the screen for the Grayzone. I mean, it's such a detailed, well-written article, and he explains bit by bit how they tried to discredit Ian Henderson. Lovely stuff. So, guys, what we'll do, I'm going to end the stream now, but I will be back very shortly because we have some stories to discuss. Okay, so don't go anywhere. And if you would like to support the show and follow me on Twitter, please go ahead. I will paste the links in the live chat. And there we go. Okay, so I'll be back in just a second. There we go. Everything has been pasted. Wonderful. And again, thank you to the lovely Aaron Maté. I will see you guys in a second. Peace out.